Season 2, Episode 3. Our guest today was a USC Trojan, where he was a member of 2 national championship teams, a first-team All-American. He won the Morris Trophy and was selected in the second round of the NFL Draft by the Carolina Panthers. 3-time All-Pro, 5-time Pro Bowl, and played in Super Bowl 50, actually. He founded Mortal Media in 2016 with NBA star Blake Griffin and produced a range of successful movies. We're going to hear more about that. He's a principal of the Oso Monterrey, a professional football team that just played for the championship down in Mexico. He's a philanthropist, entrepreneur, and most importantly, a father. Welcome, Ryan Kalil. Thanks for being here.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is great. I was pretty excited about this today, and on short notice, you were able to pop in here. I always start, hey, tell us about your childhood, unique situation of actually having a father that played professional football. Tell us a little about that.
Yeah, my story's funny considering where I ended up in professional sports as a career, but I grew up not a sports kid. I played a lot of sports, but mostly because I grew up with a coach. My dad played football, grew up in Southern California, went to Servite High School, which is where my brother and I ended up going.
Big school.
He got recruited. He was also a really great pitcher. He loved baseball. He was a left-handed pitcher. I think that's one of his big life regrets. I think I think in another life he wanted to be a reliever for the Anaheim Angels.
More so than football?
Yeah, I think so. I think more so than football. My old man absolutely adores the Angels. My brother and I never really caught onto that fandom. I think that's the one thing about us kids that bothers him. But yeah, he chose football. He got recruited to the University of Arkansas. Mm-hmm. Lou Holtz was the head football coach there. Pete Carroll was a GA there.
Wow.
Lane Kiffin's dad, Monty Kiffin, was the defense coordinator. So kind of a fun small football world. But then he eventually transferred to the University of Arizona, which is where his family is from. He got drafted in the 11th round to the Buffalo Bills when they had a lot more rounds back then. And then him and his buddies, in that era, I think my dad told me the highest paid offensive lineman was making like $100K a year. He was like the Outland Trophy winner. And then the USFL came about, and a lot of those guys jumped ship over the USFL, and they were making more money in the NFL, but still a lot of those guys were making more money in the offseason with other jobs than they were, breaking their heads in every week. And so my pops played about 6 years, and then he hung it up, started his own business, moved out to California, missed football, so he got into coaching full time, and us kids kind of hung around it. So for me, I always played a sport, or I always played football just because my old man was coaching it, and that felt like the easiest thing to sort of the path of least resistance.
Sure. Did he encourage you or discourage you or neutral?
He was great. My dad, I've seen a lot of different kind of parents. I think because my dad was also the president of that league. Excuse me. Sorry, early morning phlegm.
That's all right. We gave you some toxic coffee.
Yeah. San Diego coffee is a little different than the bougie stuff I drink in L.A. I think because he was the president of the Youth Football League, growing up, I think he got exposed to a whole range of different kinds of parents.
Sure.
And so I think he was very conscious of how he wanted to approach youth sports with his kids. And so my dad's philosophy was pretty simple. We weren't going to play video games all day and not do anything. We were going to play some kind of team sport. He didn't care what it was. So we chose football just because it seemed important to him, and we were just around it all the time. And so that was kind of his whole mentality. It was not about you're going to be great at football, I want you to do football. It was you're going to play some sport, I don't care what it is. And whatever it is you're doing, whether it's sports or it's school or whatever, you're going to do it to the best of your ability. So that my dad was always, he sort of instilled that early on, compete at what you do, do it to the best of your ability. It's not about results. I don't really care if you end up being the best player or if you win games or lose games. I just want you to do things to the best of your ability. And so that's what we always did. And we took that to heart. And I think I was always naturally competitive. And I liked that of boys, honestly. I was always undersized. I was not the kid that was getting picked first in any kind of team sport. So I kind of thrived early on, getting validation and that of boys from doing a technique in a drill really great.
Sure.
Do it like Kalil. And then that translated into team stuff. And then that translated into me starting. And so it's funny, like anything in life, but especially in football, especially playing offensive line, the keys to success are the things that are the least sexy. It's the most mundane, boring, repetitive things. There's no shortcuts to
Discipline.
it. Yeah, discipline.
Items.
And it takes a tremendous amount of discipline to do the thing that is so repetitive and monotonous and boring. But it's so important. I mean, they're just, in anything you pursue in life, I've learned there's no shortcuts to it. You have to do the hard, nitty-gritty foundational work. You just have to. And I think that's important to say, because now that I'm coaching my son's football team and I'm watching my kids go through youth sports, I think the culture, and by the way, I thought it was in LA, but it's really in the water everywhere. I talk to buddies all across the country. I think the youth sports culture is such that we're so infatuated with the results that we forgot to teach the kids the fundamentals, and you got to learn to take your first steps and walk before you can run. But too many coaches have watched too many Hard Knocks. They've watched too many behind the scenes with their favorite coaches and players, that they just want to be the next Belichick. They want to install plays. And what I found is, and this is all sports, but they want to talk about these high level things and instill these high level concepts with a lot of our kids. And what you realize, you take for granted, most of these kids can't even tell you the difference of positions, right? They can't even tell you what are the 5 most basic things of whatever their respective sport is, because they're caught up in this kind of FOMO culture of we have to win, we have to succeed, we need the results. And I think it's why you see a lot of kids burning out. I think it's why you're seeing the product of sports also take a hit and an impact, because we've had to simplify it and water it down. Speaking more football specifically, because we're not in the business anymore of developing players and making the best players possible. We're in a production-based business now. Yeah. And that's tough, especially at a young age.
There's kids now, you get the portal, they'll transfer 2 times, 3 times. It's hard for a coach who used to be in the recruiting and coaching business. Now they're in the retention business. And it trickles all the way down to high school, because there's families that are moving around and traveling. We have a youth organization, just outside of San Diego, where I would say a third of the organization are families that have moved to play youth football. And what ends up happening is, I think the kids that are, the better athlete on that given day, meaning they're just a little further in their development based on their age, the other kid may have not caught up yet, they get the crown. And then as that changes, they haven't learned the things that you're referring to in terms of discipline. And then all of a sudden they're a little behind, and they're like, why the hell am I behind? And that's where these kids get burned out. And the parents, when they get involved in the league or they're coaching, you have this really complicated defensive scheme. The kids don't understand that. They've got to have the basics. And it's tough a bit to watch, because I'm old at 57, and everything was fundamental. And you kind of learned it from the ground up. And then as your body grew and developed, you pass people that maybe were a little older than you, and you get back there. But I don't think people are thinking about what you're talking about, which is the discipline and fundamental items. And so when your dad is coaching and you're playing, when do you realize that you've got, quote unquote, it, or the gift to play at at the next level? Are you in high school? Is it youth? And how did that whole process take place?
Honestly, it wasn't until the end of high school, which kind of goes back to what you're saying. I think youth sports culture is such that we've also gotten away from recognizing and understanding where kids are in their development too, because physical attributes still matter in sports.
Yes.
There's this great book I read called The Sports Gene, and it talks about some of the records from decades ago in terms of how we haven't really, there's this misconception that we've gotten bigger, stronger, faster. Yeah. And really what's changed are three things. It's been the sports science. They look at track runners and what they used to run on burnt ash to this kind of cushy, synthetic,
that's a good point,
bouncy stuff, to the shoe wear, to all the equipment, has changed tremendously. And even that hasn't given a huge edge to some of those records from 80, 90 years ago. And then the other two are sports psychology. We've gotten better at being disciplined in our health and how we approach drinking and smoking and just kind of keeping our body like a temple and
Sure.
almost treating it like a fine-tuned race car, to even how we sort of identify which body types work better and specifically with sports. And so, they took two individuals who were the same height, but one had a longer torso, shorter legs, and the other had longer legs, shorter torso, and one's a better swimmer and one's a better track runner.
Sure.
So these things haven't really changed. We haven't evolved into a super species yet. But I think we've gotten away from understanding how important those things are. And to the point of different kids developing at different times, for me, I didn't hit a growth spurt until probably sophomore, junior high school. So I was always undersized. So when people ask me, like, when did you know you were going to be a pro? I didn't. It was sort of a blind trust. And honestly, like, sports for me back then, way before NIL or money or anything, I mean, most kids were really focused on, here's a way to go to college and pay for it. For me, I badly wanted to go to USC Film School. I was into the arts pretty early. I used to do stop motion animation as a kid, and I just fell in love with the behind the scenes process that I saw in filmmaking, and wanted to be a part of it. And it was the first time, probably when I was like 12, that I saw, you could do that as a career. I think movies were so magical to me. I just thought it was so unattainable, and so to see all these different kinds of jobs and different ways into it, I got really infatuated with that early. But for me, football was a means to an end, because I badly wanted to go to SC Film School. My dad was like, well, I don't have the money and you don't have the grades to go there. But I'd watch my dad help a lot of kids get scholarships.
Sure.
And so I sort of told him, hey, like, I want to do what you've done with these kids. Like, I'll do anything, let me know what I need to do. And my dad was so funny. He had the foresight to say, all right, he goes, here's what we have to do. But just so you know, like, our relationship's going to be different, because now I got to be your coach.
Right.
And I'm like, no, it's going to be fine. Like, you're my dad.
Yeah.
Everything's going to be fine. And he was right. We butt heads. He had me, because I didn't know what hard work was. I thought I knew.
Yeah.
I didn't know what sacrifice was. I thought I knew. So, yeah, it was a lot of extra time in the weight room. The biggest thing for me was I was a really good technician younger. Like I told you, I really, really loved and enjoyed being the best at these specific techniques that
Sure.
I was learning. And they served me well because I was always undersized. And that was the biggest knock on me, was I was going to be too small to play offensive line. And so I really honed in on this plan, which was I got to get as big and as strong as I can. So it was a ton of extra time in the weight room. It was a ton of weight gain shakes and just overeating.
Yep.
Which most people, including my mom, was like, oh, that must be nice to eat whatever you want. But it was a chore.
Right.
I mean, when you're eating something like 6,000, 8,000 calories a day, and then you eat to the point of being full, and then an hour later you got to do a weight gain shake, which my brother and I, we called the gut bomb. That's hard. It is a job. It's an absolute job. And so, and and then even then you're doing all these things and you're just sort of hoping and praying like this is going to work out, but you have no idea. There's no, this was just when they started doing rankings on the internet and
what year roughly?
This is 2003.
Got it.
So 2002, 2003, this is when they're starting to do the 5-star ratings, and I think I was like a 3-star guy. So I was lucky because for me, USC at the time, it was right before we went on a run with all those teams. They just lost to Utah in the Las Vegas Bowl. So I was still – they were getting 5-star recruits. Pete Carroll, people forget, he was like a 6th choice for USC. He had just gotten out of the NFL, but he was not somebody that the program, the fans were super excited about getting. And Pete had an amazing philosophy about how he was going to build a team, and he just started on this path of what he was going to build at USC. But he was, at that time, they were getting 5-star guys, but I was still like a blue-collar worker that they were mixing in that they could get. And they were really adamant about getting local Southern Cal kids. And so we got there, and then we just went on those runs. And then again, I was still undersized there. I played tackle in high school, but they were like, you're a 270-pound tackle. That's not going to work in college. And so they're like, we also need a center. Our guy's a 5th-year guy who's going to retire. You're big enough to play that. So I didn't know anything about center, but luckily my dad played. So then I had to go from – I got the scholarship, but then I was like, I've never played center before. I convinced everybody I could do it. So we were like 3 times a week at the park working on snapping and, because everybody's like, oh, it's just like offensive line, but snapping. It's such a hard position. It's easier in other ways than guard and tackle, but it's much harder in terms of sort of being the quarterback of the line, but also snapping and stepping and moving and having that consistent it's a specific skill set that I didn't have a lot of reps on.
My younger kid played center at Cathedral here, and obviously at a far lower level than where you're at, but I didn't realize it was that complicated. Like, I was a Z, played a little bit of quarterback, and I'm like, oh, I got the most complicated job on the field. But then the centerpiece came, and he's coming back with, here are all my responsibilities, and I'm like, wow, this is real work. How did USC find you? I mean, did your dad help in that process? Were you playing at that level? Like, what was that process?
Yeah, again, I was not a highly ranked guy in high school. So, again, my dad was like, look, don't worry about the rankings. Here's what we're going to do. You want to stay in Southern Cal anyways. You want to be a local kid. UCLA, USC, Stanford, they have these Nike camps. So this is where you can get noticed, especially as an offensive lineman. But the way to get noticed is you got to win these one-on-one drills. And so most of the camp is sort of like a combine. You're getting measured, you're running around, you're testing your strength, your speed. But my dad was right. For linemen, defense and offensive linemen, the real test was they want to see how guys do, especially with no pads on. They want to see who's tough. They want to see who's a great technician, because you got to be technically sound with no pads.
Yeah.
And especially on the offensive line, you got a guy coming at you full speed. You can get popped in the mouth. So it was almost an advantage for me because I was really technically good with my hands. And then also on offensive line, especially at center, you're almost like a wrestler. You got to have a really strong core. You got to be able to move laterally and quick. So these were all attributes I did well at tackle, but now was moving to center. And so my pops was right. He was like, we're going to go to this place, and there's going to be hundreds of kids here, and you're going to have to stand out. And the way you do that is you got to be the toughest kid. But then he also said, and this was hard for me because I was such a rule follower, he goes, you're also going to have to cut in line. And I was like, I don't know what that means. And he goes, well, there's hundreds of kids here, so you might get 1 rep. But he's like, that's not going to be enough to get the attention of these coaches. Yep. So he goes, you're going to go, and then you're going to cut the line about 5 kids back and go again, and then you're going to do it again, and you're just going to keep doing it. And he goes, if somebody has a problem with it, then cut in front of somebody else who doesn't have a problem with it.
Yeah.
Because he goes, a lot of these kids don't care to be here. So he's like, you got to decide. Yeah. He's like, you got to decide. you want to give up reps for those kids, or are you trying to make a name for yourself? And so I just had such a problem with that. And so it was a good lesson for me too, because my dad was like, look, he goes, we're not stealing money from the IRS. Like you're moving in front of kids at a football camp. Like let's look at the stakes here.
Yeah.
So that helped me a little bit, even though the idea of taxes and IRS felt also as equally foreign,
especially
to a 15-year-old kid. But yeah, so I did that. I cut, and I probably got about 10 reps at this Stanford camp, and I got noticed by UCLA coaches and SC coaches, and they invited me to their exclusive camp on their respective campuses. And so the first one I went to was the UCLA camp, and I thought I played pretty great. And after the camp, the offensive line coach there, and I forget his name, but he came to talk to us after the camp, and I was feeling pretty good about myself. My dad was pretty happy, and my dad said, "So what do you think about Ryan? You know, are the Bruins a place that might use them?" And he said, "Look," he goes, I like," and he's saying this like I wasn't there, but he goes, "I like your son. He's tough, but you know, he's got short arms and not a whole lot of room to grow."
Oof.
And I was just like, oh man. And my dad goes, "That's why UCLA effing sucks and always will." And we walked off. So now I'm pissed at my dad.
Right.
Because I'm like, "Oh, you ruined it." He goes, "You don't want to go here."
Yeah.
He's like, "This guy doesn't know anything what he's talking about." So
wow.
Like, okay.
I love that. I love your dad.
Which I didn't want to go there anyways, but I didn't have any offers. So I was like, I'll take them where I can get them.
Right.
So then we went to the USC camp, and I did the same thing. I cut in front of a bunch of kids, and I got noticed, and then they asked me to come back to another camp. And then the next camp they asked me to come back to was a more specific camp, in that they were bringing in kids that were very specific to who they were trying to recruit, and top tier kids. So it was a lot more of an exclusive camp, and now I was going against 5-star kids. And my dad gave me a whole pep talk before, and he goes, "This is the camp." He goes, "This is the one. So there's no more camps after this.
Yeah.
This is the one. You got to like put it all out there. I don't know how you get to that place, but he's like, you got to leave this place bloodied up, you know, pissed off a lot of people. Like
Yeah.
You got to do it." And so I did. Like I never kind of dug into that kind of mindset before. This kind of like really like almost die trying mindset, but I did. And the cool thing about that camp is they really wanted to see me and how I did against their 5-star guys that they were trying to recruit.
Sure.
So I didn't have to cut because they didn't take me out of the drill. So Ed Ogeron was there, and he was running the drill, and I probably took like 15 reps.
Wow.
And by the end of that thing, I was exhausted. I was bloodied. My shirt was ripped.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things in life where I had no regrets about how I performed, what I did. Like I really left it all out there, and I never had that kind of feeling before.
How did you – so as an observer or as a coach or myself, later in life, I got to that point of being able to pull that trigger where you can go 100%. You know you have to. You can see that coming. But, man, when I was in high school or I was in college, I just didn't have that level of, you know, I remember walking off the field, and I was going to do something with my girlfriend, and some of the guys, the better players that are at Whitewater, are like, "Hey, we're doing this special forces drill, running these hills." And I'm looking at the garbage can that I had to go jump in the ice, and I'm like, I'm going to go jump in. And I'm like embarrassed to even tell that story, but I didn't have that switch. So was it you had so much trust in your dad, and he had told you things that came true? Is that what got you to be able to kind of flick the switch there, or how did you do it at that age? Because I think that's the difference between success and failure for a lot of kids.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've thought about it, and I think I had so much blind trust. I think also I really respected the way my dad went about it. I got to see firsthand how much his players really loved him and respected him. And you know, when you're in sports, you get a whole spectrum of different kinds of personalities that you're exposed to, including coaches and parents that don't necessarily interact with you. So I just sort of had this running highlight reel of all the different kinds of personalities and different mindsets and how to approach it. And I just really love the way my dad did. So obviously I'm a little bit biased, but I've always sort of really looked up to my old man and how he's done things. And so I think it made it easy to kind of have that blind trust, but it is a lot of trust because I don't remember there being markers or moments or things where I'm like, oh, this is going exactly how he said it was going to go. You know, I mean, he would sort of prepare me and we still butted heads. Like I still either didn't know what it looked like or I felt like it was too hard, you know? And that's the job of a great coach or teacher.
Sure.
It's sort of to take you where you can't take yourself.
Yep.
And sometimes you're willing to do it and sometimes you're not. And hopefully you have the retrospect and hindsight to say, thank God I did, or I wish I would have, which hopefully helps you in the next experience, you know? So I think younger, I've always had a really good self-awareness about what I was capable of and what I wasn't. And I was lucky enough to have people like my dad who knew what they were doing and knew how to push me to that next part. But I think the thing I possessed was this singular goal that I so badly wanted to go to SC Film School that I was going to do whatever it would take to do it. And so I didn't really know if it was going to work or how it was going to work, but I just put all my trust and faith in my pops of like, I'll do it and I'll do it to the best of my ability if you tell me this is what it is. And so, and that had to be hard on him too, because I'm sure he probably had doubts because I was undersized. I mean, the kind of kids that places like USC were recruiting, they were big boys. So, you know, coaches always like to say what matters the most is the tape. But I've been around sports long enough to see coaches get really infatuated with body types and potential. And I've seen them get burned time and time again too. Because, yeah. But I saw it. I even saw it in the NFL. I saw coaches who would they'd get so enamored with a guy and his size and his strength and his speed. And I get it because you can't teach that. That's
right.
That's
it's
genetics.
An asset you already
it's
get
an asset
in the
you
package.
Get.
Yep.
So I think a lot of coaches, their ego won't allow them to accept the idea that they can't form them into the next great thing. But there's still that depth of soul. There's still that grit. There's still that tenacity that has to come from the individual that it's hard to teach.
Yes, especially at that age,
yeah.
right?
So I think for me, I learned it from my dad. I think some of it was self-taught. I think some of it is just taking a jump and a leap, and because there's a fear part of it too. This is something I learned. And I think I made this up, but maybe I took this from somebody else. But this one I'm saying is mine. I forever, you know, as you're around sports forever, you hear all kinds of sayings and you get all kinds of speeches, and some of them have stayed with me forever. Some of them probably subconsciously, but there's a tried and true sports phrase or slogan or whatever you want to call it that I've heard since I was a kid that I was always confused by. But I'd always hear coaches say, don't be afraid to be great. And I always thought that was so dumb. I just couldn't understand. It just didn't make sense to me. Like, why would anybody be afraid to be great? Of course, everybody wants to be great. And so I thought about that forever and ever. As I got to the end of my football career, for whatever reason, there was a kid, I won't name his name, but I tried so hard to take him under my wing. I got into that mindset that I was just being critical of with coaches, that I was like, God, this kid has all the intangibles. He could be a way better player than I ever was. I was jealous of his strength, of his athletic ability. He was really smart, but he struggled to put it all out in the line. He struggled to do it to the best of his ability. He had bad forming habits. He could not get out of his own way. He just refused to be consistently a hard worker. You know, he had flashes of it that just blew you away. And I tried every angle I could to get to him mentally and emotionally, and I just couldn't. Yeah. Like I couldn't get the horse to drink the water. And I thought about that quote, like, don't be afraid to be great. And And the more I talked to him and the more I understood his mindset and the more conversations we had, what I realized is he was really afraid to fail. He was really afraid to put himself out 100% and it not to be good enough. And I don't think he was completely aware of that, but that's the psychology of his mind that I was able to take away from all the conversations we had. He just had this crazy fear of not being enough, this crazy fear of knowing that his best was not good enough. So I think that's true of a lot of people, not just in sports. I think it's easier and safer for people to say, I could have been an all-pro. I could have been a guy who played a long time at this particular sport, or I could have been great and made a lot of money at this particular thing. I just couldn't because whatever, insert excuse. It's much easier to swallow that for a lot of people than it is to say, I did it to the best of my ability. I tried everything I could, and I was not enough, and it didn't come true for me, and I hate that, and I hate that I wasn't enough for it. And so when I think about don't be afraid to be great, like that's the thing I always think about. And I know that sounds cheesy, but I saw it in real time, and it made me appreciate that, and it made me appreciate my willingness to take chances and to be okay with failing. And part of that comes from just playing offensive line. I think there's a mentality, a conditioning that you're used to of like never getting praise, going 90 plays in a row, great, and then giving up the game-winning sack and pretending like it never happened and moving on and having the resilience to do that over and over and over again and know that you're going to get picked on by the media and the fans. Anyways, that's a really long-winded way of getting around to, I think you can learn it. I think it's something that you have to be exposed to and see other people do. But at the end of the day, you have to take the leap. You have to decide to not be afraid to be great and to put yourself out there and to fail.
That observation is pretty remarkable. I go through all of these podcasts, and at the end, I've got one sheet where I make document, hey, what's the big lesson learned in this particular podcast? And we're even going to call this thing, Don't Be Afraid to Be Great, right? I see it all the time. I didn't even think about it until you just said it now, and I'm an old dude, right? Like whether it was auto racing, whether it was football, whether it's business or anything else, one of the things that's kind of our mantra here at the company is man in the arena. We're out there battling these big companies, Riddell, Schutt, /Vices, and you publicly fail when you're in front of everyone. There's no place to hide here. There was no place when you were in the NFL or at USC where people are watching you and they're on their couch. When Tiger Woods was an up-and-comer, the guy that was on the couch cheering him on, hey, look at this unique person coming there kicking ass. And then when he had some personal struggles, they're still sitting on the couch watching him saying, oh, look, he failed. He's just like me. He's not quite there. Then they cheer when he comes back, but they're still on the couch. And it's hard for a young person or even a lot of people that are mature in their lives because they don't want to take that chance. It's easier to have the excuse of I could have done this versus I put it all out there and failed. I just wasn't good enough. And I think your quote is huge, and it's a mindset that if you share that with a young person, it'll click with some people. But as people get more mature, while you were saying this, it kind of gave me a little chill, actually, because it's so true. Yeah, it's very interesting. How did your mom play into all of this, right? Because you're telling me your dad kind of goes from being a dad to now having to coach you up. So he's probably got a little bit more of an edge, and you're probably grinding back and forth with him. Then you got mom saying, I got my baby here. He wants to play, but he wants to go to film school. How did she moderate that? And did that create, any friction, or did she smooth it out for you?
I mean, she was so supportive of all of it. I mean, she also was a player's wife, so she was around the game and understood the sacrifice and all the time my dad spent in his own right trying to stay in it and get bigger and stronger, and all the sacrifice he's made around the game. So she understood that aspect of it, but she also, I think she knew my love for the arts and how badly I wanted to have that as a career. And she was definitely like the yin to the yang, because I think the other thing you don't realize when you have no experience in what it takes, and this isn't anything, this is in the pursuit of sports, being an entrepreneur, it is such a lonely journey, because you don't realize how much time and energy and sacrifice it takes to do all these things. And you talk about man in the arena, in the Tiger example, those are only the public moments that anybody, good, bad, or indifferent, like those are only the public moments anybody gets to see. And so it is that Michael Jordan thing where he talks about all the shots he missed, all the time work, all the workouts, all the things the things that aren't sexy, that, again, it takes so much time and energy, and emotionally it's so taxing, because you're constantly in this state of faith and belief that what you're doing is the right thing, that what you're doing is going to put you on a track to success. And people can't see or understand the lonely hours of the night where you're fighting imposter syndrome or doubt, and then there's the external versions of that too, where you have people saying this will never work, or coaches who are like, you're too small and your arms are too short. And your dad's saying, well, don't listen to him, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But then in the back of mind, you're like, well, maybe he does know what he's talking about. He's a college football coach, and you're my dad. You're supposed to say good things about your son, you know? So, you compound that out over the course of months, years, and it's a lonely journey to have that. And so my mom was always great about pulling me out of that hole. And most of that's self-inflicted. Like, nothing really externally is happening.
But your mind is juggling.
Your mind is juggling. Your mind is constantly betraying you. And so she was always great at helping me silence that part of me and giving me incredible validation in what I was doing was the right thing, and trusting myself. And so she was just always so warm and encouraging about all of it. And it helped me balance all that stuff, because it was tough. Like, he was tough on me, because I didn't know what hard work looked like. I thought I did, but I didn't know. And you don't know until you know.
That's right.
You just don't.
Yep.
And I've had that at every level I've played at. College, weirdly enough, was the hardest in terms of like volume and load, but the NFL was, in terms of physicality and just mental fortitude, was the hardest thing I've ever had to do.
USC, give me a little look into who you're playing with. Guys, a lot of guys are just focused on football. You've got the film school thing still in your heart and mind, so you're balancing both. USC's going through this crazy run at the time. So give me a little background on personalities of guys that you're playing with. What's it like working with Pete, and how are you balancing school and football?
Yeah. Well, when they finally offered me the scholarship after that camp, and they asked me to come up to actually what happened was after the camp, I told you I was all bloodied. I'd done like 15 reps. And one of the coaches was talking to my dad afterwards, and he said, we'd love for your son to come back. There's another camp we have at the end of the month. We'd love him to come back. And my dad, without missing a beat, he goes, no, he's done with camps. You've seen his tape. You saw what he can do. So you either like him or you don't.
Yep.
There's not another camp that's going to change your
Ballsy.
opinion about him.
Yep.
So, again, I'm sitting there going, like, what are you doing? I hope you know what you're doing. Like, these guys like me. You're turning them away.
Yeah.
So he goes, all right, don't leave yet. So the coach disappears. He comes back, and he says, Pete wants to see you up in his office. And so we're walking up there, and I'm going through my head of like, oh, God, I wonder what we're going to talk about. And so I asked my dad, I'm like, what do you think they want to talk about? And my dad laughed, and he goes, they're going to offer you a scholarship. So he goes, this is a school you want to go to, right? You better say yes before we leave. And so we go up to the office, and sure enough, Pete offers me, and so I say yes. But what I came to find out years later was Pete liked me. I think he had a hard time with my size, and most coaches did, and I get it. But I think what ended up happening was a couple coaches, including Ed Ogeron, they went on a limb with Pete and said, we like him. We understand you're concerned about his size, but look at his pops. His mom's real tall. We think he still has room to grow.
Sure.
Again, that goes back to, like, these are experienced guys, been around the game forever, and I think we've lost a little bit of that in youth sports, especially with our young kids. Like, we are kids who are peaking early are getting more benefits than kids who have more potential physically, and it's really tough. But I also understand why the sports culture is that way. But that's a whole nother topic. So, anyways, I didn't forget that, because once I got to SC, a couple of those coaches reminded me that Pete didn't want me, and that, you gotta earn this. Like, we went on a limb for you. Like, don't let us down. And obviously in those days, no NIL, like I still got the like great living room visit and said all the nice things and hugged my mom and made her feel comfy. And then when we got there, they locked the doors behind you, and they're like, "You're in our world now. Like, that's it." And there's no transfer portal, and there's nothing. So like those coaches, the thing Pete did a really good job of was he put together a really incredible staff, and he got to kind of like his role in all of it was he sort of built this persona of like the fun uncle that he was gonna that you were gonna go to, that was gonna make it lighter, and he was gonna sort of build his philosophy in his talks and in his actions and how he ran his program, but then he was going to let everybody else kind of run us to the ground.
And be the bad guy.
And really condition us and make us tough, well-oiled football machine. So those were some of the hardest practices I've ever been. I mean, Pete's whole philosophy was around competing and everything, and I loved that because I intuitively already sort of came to that younger. So I loved competing. So I was always undersized, and I was not the top of the totem pole with the talent that was on that team, but I loved competing. I loved winning one-on-one drills against guys who were 5 stars and guys who were like, the jewel of coach's eyes. It was just fun to like get that boys in that environment.
Beating up the shiny object, right?
It really was, but it also earned me a spot. Like I started to kind of climb, and so I was a backup my freshman year. We'd won a ton of games that year. We ended up sharing. We didn't play in a national championship, but we ended up sharing an AP national championship with LSU that year. And so the next year we were top of the rankings. That 5th-year senior graduated. So in spring ball, I was like, oh, this is my job now. And we ended up recruiting not only the top offensive lineman in the country, who was a center, but the top football recruit of all the players. His name was Jeff Byers, and he was up for like Gatorade Player of the Year against Dwight Howard.
Oh, man.
So this kid, he was from Loveland, Colorado. And, I was kind of being a hater. I was like, what kind of talent's in Loveland, Colorado? And so I was watching his highlight tape, and his highlight tape was the most impressive highlight tape I've ever seen of any offensive lineman. Wow. It was mostly just him pulling and running downfield and just absolutely mauling guys. And so he got there, and we were not friends at first. And he was a stud. I got to tell you, like, he was a stud, and Pete loved him. It was Pete's guy.
Yeah, so that's tough.
It's hard. It was really hard. And again, though, like Pete also liked me. He just really loved this kind of situation was Pete's favorite because he loved 2 guys competing. And he was really good about never promising starting roles or like I remember we even had a running back room that was so incredibly gifted with Reggie Bush and Lendell White and a whole slew of guys who equally could have been starters over those guys.
Sure.
So the competition on the team was like that in most of the position groups. And so Pete really liked the competition between me and Jeff. And so I started spring ball as center, and he came early, and he was slowly winning the job over. I mean, he was outperforming me, and he was more consistent. So it was just me staying in it and trying to keep my mental fortitude and just continuing to compete. And then, this is where luck comes into play. And who knows what my career path would have been had this not happened, but he ended up hurting his hip pretty bad. He got surgery. He was out that season. And I came in and we went on this huge run and ended up playing Oklahoma in national championship game and absolutely put a whooping on them in the Orange Bowl. And then, that was kind of my spot. And then that was the first time I sort of, that whole season, I sort of built my confidence and felt like I belonged. And so I sort of carried that with me all the way through my career there.
That confidence component that you're talking about, you're playing in this strata of players. Just think of the people, you rattled off, like your quarterbacks, Matt, if I remember right.
Matt Leinart.
You got, Reggie and Lindell, and you got a lineman coming in like that. And at first, I think in any organization like that, whether you're going and you're trying to become a SEAL or you're in the astronaut program in the NFL, like you're the highest performing humans in probably the highest performing country on the planet. So to go there and do that, once you feel like you're in and you have that confidence, I almost feel like it's kind of an orb around you because your expectation is to be great now. It goes back to your quote, where before that, you're trying to be great. You have to convince yourself that you can be there. So once your mindset is in that place and you're playing and the team is being looked at almost like a professional team because, at the time, the celebrities are swooning around this. How did that impact you?
It didn't because I think the thing Pete did such a good job of was he put this incredible team together of superstars and blue-collar, hardworking guys. And I think for the most part, he did a good job of maintaining that. Although I do joke, like a few years later, because of where we were in terms of SC was back and everybody knew who we were and we were considered one of the best teams in college football, it was much easier for those guys to recruit, and they were bringing in mostly five-star guys.
Sure.
So it's funny, again, luck, timing-wise, 2 seasons later, SC would have never probably even invited me to the camp, as a 3-star recruit. So there's a lot of luck in that role. But to go back to what you were saying, I think the thing Pete did such a good job of was, and I said this earlier, those SC practices were some of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Those practices were harder than the games, and that was on purpose. They built a whole philosophy around, we have the greatest team to compete against every single day in the country. So if we can compete week in and week out, day in and day out with this team, there's no team that can beat us.
Sure.
So they made those teams, and they made those practices incredibly challenging, incredibly hard, from a conditioning standpoint, but also from a mental standpoint too. So our scout team was even amazing. Guys on our scout team were guys like Clay Matthews.
Wow.
Like he was on our scout team. And I remember, what's so funny about that? And I tell Clay this all the time. I remember getting absolutely chewed out by coaches because Clay was like wreaking havoc in our scout team. He's like, you're going to let this walk-on? You're going to let this walk-on make a fool out of you. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. This walk-on's crazy good. Like, this is the best walk-on I've ever seen in my life.
Yep.
And then sure enough, later we end up giving him a scholarship and he becomes who he becomes. But there's a whole slew of guys like that. Those scout teams were incredibly good and talented and tough, man. It was just tough. So there was no days off. There were no periods where you were like, oh, I can get a breather. They were challenging. And then we had 6 a.m. workouts. We had tons of film session. This was run like a professional team. And there was a lot of pro guys there as coaches now. We were also incredibly lucky to have that kind of experience and that kind of staff. And Pete did a good job of keeping it light. So I think to the celebrity stuff, we were talking about my mom sort of being the one that helped balance the tough part of that. I think Pete was kind of that version in our college football setting because those practices were so hard and he did a good job of keeping it light. And every day there was always something new or fresh or exciting to go do. And I will say the other thing I always loved about Pete and that I'm always grateful for him to this day was he also he was really great at, as long as you were working your ass off and you were doing everything you could to be the best teammate for your team, be the best player you could. He really valued and embraced guys' personalities and hobbies and things that they were into. So he knew early on I really loved film and television. So he was always helping me get access to that. He was also somebody who let me make parody videos and like practice that part of my craft on the team.
That's pretty cool.
So I got to make these videos that made fun of teammates. I got to make videos that were just like stupid. A couple videos that probably would have got me canceled today. But in the setting of, 18-year-olds in a locker room, like it was fine. But yeah, it's weird because I got a ton of reps. I got a ton of storytelling, film editing, filmmaking reps at SC in Pete Carroll's football locker room that I'm forever grateful for. And then it gave me the confidence that I could do both. Like, as long as you're doing things to the best of your ability and one's not taken away from the other, you 100% can be a whole person and find these other things and pursuits that aren't just only football. And that's what I did. And so then we got to the end of my career at SC, and I just didn't think I was going to play in the NFL. And partly because I still had this narrative follow me that I was just way too small, and that the only reason I was playing well was because I was a great technician and I was on a good football team.
Sure.
And it's sort of that thing that I bought into, which is like, yeah, I worked my ass off. I got some accolades, but also I bought into this idea of like high tide raises all ships, which is true.
Yes.
Which is true, because I will say in the NFL, some of my best seasons were on really good teams, and I don't feel like I played any different on the seasons that we had some bad teams and I was not playing as well.
Yeah.
So you're only as good as the guys next to you. But I bought into that mindset, and I just decided, okay, well, I'm not going to pursue the NFL, because guys who loved football way more than I did, who were NFL or bust kind of guys, who were all Americans, who I thought were going to be first round or first ballot Hall of Famers, were either not getting drafted or they were getting cut within the first year or two. So I was like, okay, you're constantly stacking yourself up against your peers. I'm like, I'm not as good as those 5 guys who are all out now. And everybody keeps telling me I'm way too small to play in the league. So I'm like, I'm not even going to waste time with this. This is just...
Wasn't even on your radar at all.
No. I mean, of course it was. Like I won the Morris Trophy. That's the most proud award I've ever had, because you get voted on by all your peers across the Pac-12 or Pac-10 then. Or Pac-2 now. You get voted on by all your peers. So like that award, I felt like I earned more than anything.
Sure.
And so, yeah, of course, like you win something like that and you're like, yeah, I could play in the NFL. But I didn't win the Remington, which is Best Center Award. And guys who were winning the Remington weren't making it in the NFL. So then you go back to like, okay, it's just a cutthroat business, and it's not, there's nothing personal about it. It's just the best of the best of the best. And so I believed that for a sec, but I didn't really buy into it. And the only one who told me I could play at the next level was my dad. But again, I was like, well, you're my dad. You're supposed to say that.
Right.
And obviously my dad, Big Frank, we call him, he obviously knew something that I didn't. But so, yeah, I just was focusing on, you were talking about all those celebrities coming around. So I took advantage of that. Anytime we were winning games, a lot of those producers and directors, people that none of my teammates knew about, I was on a beeline to every one of them afterwards. And I was trying to figure out, like, how do I get into the business? Like, what can I do? I was buddies with Max Winkler, whose dad is Henry Winkler, the Fonz. Max went to SC. And so Henry was somebody I always got to know, and he came around the program a lot, and just the sweetest man you've ever met. And so he was the first one to offer me a gig. He was like, when you're done, you can come work for me. You can be a PA or
working
assistant.
for the Fonz.
I was like,
that's cool.
So I was telling everybody that. Most of my teammates were like, who the hell's the Fonz? Yep. And so that's what I was going to do. And I wasn't going to go to the combine. I wasn't going to do any of that. And then a scout for the Bears came down and was asking me, hey, were you going to train for the combine, all this stuff? And I told him I wasn't. And it just like blew him away. And he was like, come talk to me after practice. So I did. We went and had coffee. And he just wanted to understand my mindset of like why I thought this. And I told him, I told him everything I just told you. And then I'd also said, I even asked a coach who'd coached in the NFL on our team. I said, hey, what are my chances? You've been around. And he didn't say I couldn't play in the NFL, but he sort of suggested to me, like, it's going to be a really tough, challenging road for you. Yeah. Like, you might make a practice squad, and then you're really going to have to work your ass off, but here's what you're up against, and here, like, your suspicions about it are right on. It's brutal. So I told him all that, and he was like, okay, so your biggest concern is you think you're undersized. And so he started listing all these great centers who were the same size as me, and even some of them who were lighter, and how long they played for in careers. And he's like, look, you're not going to play for the Dallas Cowboys. Like, they only draft 325-pound plus linemen. But he goes, you could play for the Broncos. You could play for the Dolphins. You could play for the Chiefs. And he just started naming all these teams that ran – an old school zone offense that had lighter athletic linemen, from the 90s on. And so it changed my perspective. And then the biggest thing he said was like, look, he goes, I'm not telling you not to pursue this film thing, but he goes, you can always go back to that. That's
sure.
always going to be there for you. This opportunity, this window, you'll never have it again. So he goes, as an old man, just trust me when I tell you, you don't want to wake up 10 years from now and go, I wish I would have gone to the combine. I wish I would have at least tried and just known that I either could or couldn't have made it. And so I took that to heart and just said, screw it. Like, he's right. I'm never going to get that opportunity again once that door closes. And so I did. I went to the combine. And I also weirdly think because I wasn't NFL or bust, it gave me a freedom.
Sure.
I saw a lot of guys who were just really tight and nervous, and I could tell, like, all their eggs were in that basket.
They're so worried about failing, right?
Yeah.
That they were tight when they went out.
And so it was such a great lesson for me because I just approached it so light. And when you do it that way, worry-free, it just does open you to be the best version of yourself, and it removes fears, and it also weirdly allows you to enjoy the process. Because I was soaking it all in. I wasn't concerned or worried about the next thing, the weigh-in or the run or the lifting. Like, I was just like, I can't wait. Like,
sure.
This is fun. Like, because I was like, I had no expectations of it. Yeah. And it just was so freeing. And I have such a vivid memory of it in a way that when I talked to a lot of other teammates, they've almost blacked out during the thing because they were so nervous.
It's almost like a trauma, right? Well,
100%, 100%. So yeah, I tested well. I thought I interviewed well. Although what's funny about that is my worst interview was with the Carolina Panthers. I overslept and I was late to the meeting and I only had 2 minutes left. So the coaches were all laughing and they're like, well, you only gave us time for one question. So the question is, if we draft you, is this what we can expect? You're just going to show up whenever you want? And I was like, no, this is a one-time thing. And funny enough, the Panthers drafted me.
That's funny. I mean, all of this is fascinating because you have such insight on looking back. But I think the thing that I noticed the most just in our dialogue here that's different than most people, including me, is that you started to look at things differently and listen at an earlier age than most people. When you're young, I think you look at your parents, you're like, they don't know shit. And then as you get old, you're like, oh, when I was 40 years old, my dad and mom were pretty smart. But whether it's a coach from the Bears, whether it was your dad, whether it was your mom's insight, having the insight to listen to that versus most young people that got the barrier up, they're going to do it their way. They know everything, served you pretty well. But I don't know how you managed to flick that switch. Probably a combination of your decisions and, things that your parents did right.
Yeah.
But, if we can put that into a pill, neither of us would have to do anything ever again. Do you attribute that to anything? Like, what opened your mind up where most people in these younger years of high school, college, they just don't have that switch turned on where they're listeners yet?
I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know what the formula is for that. I think obviously it starts with your parents. My siblings and I always had tremendous respect for our parents. So, and I don't know if that came from my dad or a combination of the two. Like I don't know. I always appreciated my dad's parenting style. He was stern but very loving.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
He was strict, but he gave us freedom to play and to critical think on our own, and to sort of, he gave us room to make mistakes and didn't hover over us, but he sort of did a really good job setting guardrails. And so I've tried to incorporate that with my kids. You know, my dad is, it's hard to explain. I can't distill it and articulate it in a way that I can put on a bumper sticker for you, but he was a really cool hybrid of sort of modern parenting and old school parenting.
Sure.
You know? And so I think that's important. And it gave me permission to be curious about things and not a robot, but also to not, but also he delivered it in a way that I respected his opinion about how wide of a path you should take,
sure,
or how big of a sandbox you should play in as you're sort of exploring and coming to things on your own. And most of that's intuitive by parents, because you want your kids to be better versions of you, and you want to, I think you obviously intuitively, consciously or subconsciously, you want your kids to not have the same pains or traumas that
sure,
you've gone through. And so I don't know. I had that early on, and I think it also is, there's a luck involved of them being right too, because there's another path where you put all that faith and trust in your parents and then it fails. And I could see a path where I go, well, you don't know anything.
Yeah.
Like I already trusted you down this thing, and I sacrificed so much and it didn't work out. And so I have less trust in what you say. Not that you don't love your parents anymore,
sure,
but I can understand how people then have to feel like they have to go figure it out on their own. So I think the fact that it worked out gave me more trust in sort of not only paying attention and listening to my dad, but also listening to others that I either wanted to emulate and be like, or that I just really admired their approach or attitude about it because it was familiar, or it reminded me of how my dad would do it.
Sure.
So I've always navigated towards those kinds of people. And some of my best teachers were coaches, not only in the game, but in life. And I find myself using a lot of their stuff, either with my own kids or continuing in other facets of my life. But I had a great coach who said, you get experience two ways. You get experience by experience, or by other people's experiences. And I've always loved that. And I've really tried to do that in all facets of my life. And sometimes, even if you could tell me something you've been through and I can trust it, but it's also that thing where you don't truly understand it or appreciate it until you go through it.
Sure.
So even you giving me advice on things and trying to keep me from having the headache of the thing you went through, it's hard to stick unless you go through it yourself. So
I agree.
And I've learned that the hard way as well too. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is, it is that thing of tough love, but it's also, I think respect comes first. And I've always respected my dad because he's always been somebody who, he practices what he preaches. Like he's a man of incredible integrity. He has an incredible work ethic. So I think more so than telling your kids what to do is showing them how to do it. Yeah. And I watched my dad sacrifice a lot. I watched him have a ton of resilience. I watched him fail and do it with a smile, or not with a smile, but never a victim mentality, and sort of pick himself up and try something different. It's like I watched that, and when you're observing that, it's hard to not let that soak in and,
sure,
and admire and respect them. So for me, I think that's the most important thing is showing our kids how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great point. Your parents both still alive? Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm sure you're the benefactor of that, but your kids as well. I'm sure they love that involvement. So you get to Carolina, you get drafted, and okay, now you're the dog that caught the car. What do you do now? Like, you got to move. What's that process like, going from playing at USC under this big spotlight and, cream of the crop. And now you're almost getting a little bit of a reset going to the NFL where bigger, faster, better, right?
Yeah.
How do you make the adjustment? What's that part of your life like?
I think from there's a couple aspects of that. From a football aspect, I think I benefited from coming from such a competitive program because I didn't feel it to be a huge jump talent-wise. It was definitely more consistent. So, I didn't find guys bigger, stronger, faster. I just found them more consistently stronger, bigger, faster.
Got it.
You in the NFL, in college, everybody knows the big rivalries. Everybody knows the big games, and those are a battle. But every now and then you can play against a struggling Washington State or a struggling Arizona State. Even then, though, I would say because we were USC and we were on top of the world, we got the best game from everybody. Everybody, whatever whatever the records were, you had to throw it out because they were bringing their best A game because that was their championship game for them.
And they were playing without, like you said earlier, the risk, right? Because they're playing this team they're not expected to win, so they could just sling it.
So you were getting the best game from everybody, but even then it was okay, you go play. Washington State especially had this really, really great D tackle. Oregon State had this amazing D end. So there was guys that you were okay, and these are guys that played at the next level. But then the next three guys were guys who were never going to make a practice squad roster. Yeah. So the games weren't easy, but but in the NFL, everybody was that All-American. Everybody was that guy. So it didn't matter what position you were going against, nose tackle, D tackle, middle linebacker, backup middle linebacker. These guys were the best of the best. So it just the level of play didn't feel bigger. It just, the conditioning aspect of it felt harder, which was I'm not saying that you took plays off in college, but you had to give your best play every single play of every practice, of every period. So that was the thing that was tough, was conditioning yourself to muster up all your will and all your strength every single play.
Sure.
And then to do it over and over and over again, and to get beat and embarrassed and to reset your brain because you went from winning the Morris Trophy and being the top dog and having championship rings to nobody gives a damn who you were to. Also, the guy who got drafted in the same spot as you last year just got cut to, you're also getting hazed as a rookie and nobody cares. And so not only are you not the big man on campus, but you're also now the new scrub that is absolutely getting played with emotionally and physically.
Yep.
So it's a lot. That part of it is tough, and it's also very necessary too. I think when you're getting hazed, you're hazing shouldn't exist. Screw this. But as you look back on it, you go, oh, I understand. They want to see who's mentally tough. And now some of it can get taken too far.
Right.
But I think for the most part, there is this rite of passage thing where these guys are all, we talk about high tide raises all ships. It's so true. You're only as good as the guys you play next to. So, it is that thing. It's the closest thing to the military I don't like comparing it to the military. That always makes me feel uneasy because it's nothing like that. But in terms of the mentality of needing the guy next to you to be at his best for your own survival, in this case, not survival of life, but of career, it's so true. So the hazing part of it, I do think, is absolutely necessary because guys want to see how mentally tough you are. Guys want to see how important it is to you, how serious you take it.
If you break, right, all of those things.
Yeah, if you're going to have a mental breakdown because an older guy asks you to go pick up a case of soda,
right,
then that's not a guy you want to be in the trenches with,
right? Right.
So that part of it I get, but it's also a lot. As a rookie, you're trying to figure all this out. Everybody keeps telling you, the NFL stands for not for long, so you better have a backup plan. So I took that to heart. My first season did not go great. as a backup center. We actually had a guard get suspended, and so like an idiot, I was like, I could play guard. And I did okay the first game. It was against the Rams. And then the second game, I played against Amobi Okoye, and I think I gave up like 4 or 5 sacks. I got Jake Delhomme absolutely crushed, and Jake let me know it too. So then I got benched, and then I sort of sat the bench, and I got to reset the rest of that season. And then our starting center went down against the Cowboys, like second to last game of the season, and I went in and never came out. But that offseason, I just didn't know. I chalked it up to like, oh, I might get cut this. So I went back to L.A. and started interning at a different production company studio because I was like, well, this is what I've always wanted to do.
Sure.
And weirdly, NFL, it did. I'm so grateful I took that path because it gave me, I wasn't set for life at that time, but it gave me some pocket change that I was like, oh, I could take my time with this now. I don't have to go try to find a gig
right away.
Bills right away. Yeah. And also, like, the NFL thing opened up a ton of doors I probably wouldn't have been able to do on my own, and it got me into those rooms, but then that's where it sort of ended. Like, I had to sort of work and prove myself, but I just kind of went back to what I did with football, which is like, all right, what are the basics? What are the fundamentals? Like, what's the boring stuff I got to learn and know? And so that's the kind of stuff I was sort of a sponge about and just tried my best to get in reps because I did feel like, okay, whenever I get to come into this thing, like I'm going to be behind and having to compete with people that have been in it for decades.
Sure.
Or, so anyways, I did that, and then I went back to Carolina. I had a better second season. Came back that off season, did the same thing. So I did that on and off for years, and then fast forward, I ended up playing 13 seasons, which is just crazy. But towards the end of my career, I was good buddies with Blake Griffin, and we weirdly were sort of doing the same thing in our off seasons, and we both had mutual friends in the business who sort of were complimentary to us. That we were the few athletes who it wasn't a vanity thing. We weren't just trying to put our name on a movie poster. That we really did love and understand storytelling. So we sort of kind of went over one dinner. Was like, well, what if we did it together, and then we could, while we're still playing, the other has a different off season than the respective other sport, and so one could be in it and the other one could be playing, and then switch. And so we started.
Oh, that makes sense, right?
So we started a banner and sort of took our time. We helped each other with each other's projects, but went after our own stuff too. And Blake's a big comedy guy. I sort of love genre and sci-fi, and some of our projects kind of converge. But yeah, we started that a few years back, and then when we both got done playing, went right into producing our first thing. So, the thing we learned was it takes a long time. So we felt like we could develop a lot of projects and also not feel the pressure of you got to just make something to make it. So
sure.
we were able to be very selective and take big swings, and we impressed a lot of folks because we were able to put these projects together that we probably had no business putting together. But I also feel like we took a long time figuring out, building relationships, especially recognizing. I always joke that producing is sort of like being a GM. I mean, you really are putting the whole thing together, but you also have to be a little bit of a talent scout. And I think we had good taste in stuff, and we sort of recognized young talent early, and a lot of that talent and those relationships panned out because those ended up being creatives that all of a sudden were like the all-pros of their field. And
sure.
So that's how we were able to put together projects that, without having to write a check, which is like the biggest
sure.
trap in Hollywood,
right.
Outsiders coming in and funding things. We did it without doing any of that. And yeah, we're still learning. We've gotten a couple projects under our belt, some success, some failures. So that's the one sports carryover. Other than that, nothing else of being an offensive lineman carries over to producing, other than resilience and failing and being okay with it and learning and moving on and getting back up and doing it again.
Do you guys have the same personality type and skill set, or are they complementary? Like I had a business partner when I was in the direct response business, and it was Orthodox Jewish guy, trench coat on the beach. You know, he'd bring pastrami sandwiches down. The two of us are sitting there, and they're like, Harvard actually did a case study on you guys are so different, and you were in business together. Are you guys the same? Are you different?
We're the same in certain aspects. I think, again, those intangibles of, you know, we both have similar work ethics. We both have similar resilience to not caring about failing or getting embarrassed by something or just not really caring about any of that. I think where we complement each other is I'm more of a bull in a china shop. Like I'm just go, go, go. Blake's more surgical. And so when we come together, it is that thing where he's really great at the bigger picture. He's really great at being precise and knowing how to be more calculated and how we can sort of move something forward. And I'm like a dog chasing a bone. Like I'll just go, go, go and knock down a ton of doors and I for better or for worse, like I'm really great at jumping on something without having the whole roadmap, because I also feel like too often people get caught in this trap of thinking about something forever and never doing it.
Yeah.
And I've been guilty of that. And so, but sometimes you jump in too fast and you get burned pretty quick. So Blake's been a really good balance for me, because I think he appreciates that I'll put a ton of faith and belief in something and go 100 miles an hour. But I also appreciate that he'll sort of kind of hold the shirt back a little bit and make sure I don't jump in too early. And so we've done that. We did that on this football team we bought in Mexico.
Yeah, I got to talk about that.
Yeah.
You guys were just in the championship and came up a little short at the end. Tell me about that. How did that whole thing start?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've been at it doing the film and TV thing, but I think now both being retired athletes, it's hard not to be part of a team again, you know? And so we've had some investments in sports, and I was early on with Angel City. Not a big soccer guy, although I've come to know it and love it through my daughter. But that's an investment that did well for me, and I got to see behind the scenes of, you know, obviously the sports side, but seeing them put together a franchise and what that entailed. I was so enamored and inspired by how they were able to do it and how fast they were able to do it, that I just thought, God, it'd be so fun to do that. And every player also fantasizes about owning a team, and we always would commiserate, especially during bad seasons, about how much better we would run a team if we were in charge. So the ego part of you is always like, oh, I wonder what that would be like if I was head honcho, if I was El Jefe. And so literally Blake and I became El Jefe down in Mexico because, you know, we sports have dominated our culture more so than ever, and there's a lot of emerging sports now and so many different leagues, and so, you know, we've looked at volleyball and rugby, and we've had lots of opportunities, even pickleball come across. But I think when there's a sport you've been a part of forever like football and you know it so well, it's hard to not have that desire. And unless you're Tom Brady and have a couple $100 million, it's hard to buy into the NFL.
Sure.
Even if I did have a couple $100 million, it would just be a passive investment, you know.
You're just riding along.
Yeah,
right?
You're just riding along. So the idea of getting into an actual pro team, obviously not the level of the NFL, but any professional level, and getting to sort of lay out what you think your philosophies might be for running a team and how you might do it. All that stuff was super exciting and fun to Blake and me. And I also feel like the thing that I just love so much about this league that I knew nothing about until I did was, you know, in this day and age when players are making, professional athletes especially, are making unrelatable amounts of money, and now it's at the college level with NIL. There was just something romantic about these guys not making that much money to still keep the dream alive. Like, these guys really are playing for the love of the game. And so, I don't know, I just weirdly wanted to be a part of that.
Sure.
And it wasn't until we got down there and saw how passionate the locals in the country were about football, professional football, but also like how much of a bootstrap situation it was, and the irony of all the things that we took for granted as professional football players in the NFL.
Right.
Blake and I just thought, man, it'd be so cool to document this because, one, we were constantly being asked like, hey, what's something that you guys in the sports realm would want to follow that we haven't seen yet? And then two, I just really fell in love with the people down there and their stories and why they got into it. And these guys have jobs during the day. They practice late at night. They have families. The league makes no money. So, but there weirdly is this big fan base for it.
Sure.
And so I was like, okay, can we go document this? But also, like, by documenting it, can we help elevate it? And can we make this a legit spring league that has a lot of mileage for years to come? And so that's still a work in progress, but it's been fun. It's been fun because we've been really good at the stuff that we know. We've not so great at the stuff we don't, but we've been learning and we've been adapting. And so it's been fun to kind of like be a part of a sports team again, but also have this other aspect of it that we took for granted and had no idea about. And yeah, it's we had our first season. We got all the way to the championship game. We lost, but we had a blast and again, just fell in love with all the people, and we're excited for the growth of it and where we can see it going next.
What was the biggest challenge that you were shocked or surprised at now being an owner, right? And now you're on the other side of the desk in this thing, like, holy shit, like, what did I get myself into?
I think the biggest thing is just how involved everything is, and and money is the biggest factor with anything.
Sure.
You are running a business, and it's funny, the stuff I used to complain and be critical about in the NFL that I thought was cheap or cheaply done, I've like now find myself on the other side, and I'm like eating my own words, because they're like, hey, we only have this budget. Do you want to buy this nice thing, or do you want to do these kinds of meals, or this hotel, or this one? I'm like, no, we can't afford that.
Yeah.
So it's not that I don't want the best for the players, but I'm having to make hard decisions based on budget and money in a way
hard.
That it's easy when you're a player to just call somebody cheap and say, so that part of it. And then it's with a startup league like the LFA, it's the chicken or the egg thing, because you at a higher level place, you're also trying to elevate the league, because you can put together the best team in the world, but if the league isn't healthy, it doesn't matter. You have nobody to play. You have nowhere to go. So you're trying to balance running a team with the health of the league. And so, even though we have amazing contacts, it's still that thing where you're like, they want to know what the value add is of being a part of this. So for the sponsors, they want to know what's the exposure. And then for the media partners, they want to know who are the sponsors. So there's this weird chicken or the egg thing that's happening that you're having to convince them. But it's gotten easier. And after this season, we have incredible metrics to show, we're on par with some other big professional sports leagues. So especially ones that have been valuated pretty high in Mexico. But the biggest thing going for us is there's something like 40 million NFL fans in Mexico. They play youth sports down there. They play college football. I mean, I had no idea. They've been playing college football down there since the 20s.
I didn't know that until you told me, a month or so ago.
It's crazy.
Shocking.
It's so shocking.
And none of us up here know, right? Because football in the United States, especially now, let's say the last 30 years, is associated with the NFL. The NCAA is a feeder system in the NFL. The high schools are a feeder system into NCAA. The Pop Warners are youth, or AYF is a feeder system in the high schools. So you have the system, and it's the game is associated with that feeder system. What you're doing down there is the beauty of the game itself, which, in having done this, in the last 7 years, the one thing that I realize is that in a huddle, nobody cares if kid's a black kid, white kid, Hispanic kid, Polynesian kid. You get called for holding. You get called for holding because you held, right? It's 3rd and 19, and everybody's got the same goals. When you take out the brand of the NFL, and they do a great job of marketing and branding, but you just focus on the purity of the game, and you take, like, let's say the culture being a little bit different in Mexico than it is here, the game's purity is where it was in high school 25 years ago. And you're getting to experience and see that with, I've had some interaction with some of the folks that are in your organization, and they love the game. And these are talented players, but, you got an equipment guy that's grinding it out in addition to other things that he's doing. They don't have the resources, but the love of the game is there. And that's what I think is cool. And you capturing the essence of that in anything on a production side, but also fostering that, and the players down there and the fans. It's great that the NFL, dropped a couple of games down there because it helps you. Yeah. But now it pushes the perimeter out of what you can accomplish with the team. What's the goal with the team component of it when you look a little longer term?
Well, I think it's just that it's been a consistent great product, because the football is really good. And I think now it's about finding the money to help enhance the fan experience, because the NFL is going to be the NFL. We're not going to compete with the NFL. It's the pinnacle of football. But live entertainment is still, people want to go see a game in person. As much as the TV product is great, they really want to be there. And so to offer something that's homegrown in their backyard, I think that has longevity. That's sort of the goal for us. And to your point, these are passionate football fans, passionate players, and people who run the teams, but also the owners too. Like, these are successful business people who they're not billionaires, but they're spending a lot of their own hard-earned money to keep this league up and running, and to try to elevate it and expand it. And so there's a ton of opportunities for us, and we get a ton of incoming calls, and there's a lot of exciting progress we've already made that we can't talk about yet. But I'm excited. I think it's just a matter of keeping everybody unified and continuing to expose the products, not only to national fans of Mexico, but also I think there's an international audience that would absolutely love and adore seeing the evolution of this league, but also follow the players and their stories, because they're really great people. And again, just really inspiring to see these guys play for the love of the game.
Sure. I think it's a great project, and proud to even have any association with it at all.
Well, I appreciate you too. I think one of the things that we wanted to address was, I think because it is such a startup league, they sort of, you can feel that in all facets of it, especially the equipment. And so, like, one of the first things we wanted to address, Blake and I, was like, we should have the best equipment for our guys. We should have, and that's what I found is everybody's so focused on all the business part of it, but the best thing you can do is put the best product on the field. And so, it's one of the things I loved about getting to know you and your company was, like, this is the helmet I would have worn, knowing all the technology behind it, knowing all the science behind it. But we felt like, hey, one advantage that we could take, we felt like one aspect we could take advantage of was, and it's in the name of the product, is light helmets. Like, fatigue, especially early on or late in the season, is a big thing, and to remove that from the guys and also know that they have the protection, I mean, it's pretty incredible. And the guys were towards the end of the season were more than adamant about how much of that experience helped them long term. And it's funny, it's that thing, and you and I talked about it too, but it's like getting into a new helmet, like us athletes are so superstitious, especially us football players. So for them, because it's so light, it feels so foreign. And I remember the first time I put it on, I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know how I would do wearing this helmet,
right.
And because I think I told you, like, most guys, the helmets are so heavy, you almost use it as like a weapon. But it is like, after wearing it a long time, it's like you feel naked comparatively to the other helmets, but you can tell a difference over a long period of time. And most of the guys were telling us that, because we retrofitted not just one or two guys, but an entire team. So you had a lot of different personalities and thoughts and opinions about it. And so I'm so grateful for the guys to have that trust in us and to stick with it. And them coming up to us and telling us by the end of the season, like, this is the best thing ever, and we're so glad we stuck with it, and we're so, like, that meant the world. But now we have the problem where everybody else around the league is like, hey, well, what about us? Like,
sure.
This isn't fair that you guys are getting the best new helmets.
Right.
So we have to talk about that. Hopefully you can help us with a league-wide discount.
We'll make it work. I mean,
except for our rival team, Caldios, they don't get any light helmets.
We're going to give them the Charlie Brown, you're a good sport pumpkin that they can wear.
They can keep wearing the 10-pound helmets for all I care. Fatigue them out.
You hit on a good point, and we don't talk a lot of product on this, but there's always a little bit of a resistance of people putting this on and thinking, man, it just doesn't weigh that much. Do I have the same level of protection? And we go back and say, hey, this is the number one new helmet in all these NFL position-specific categories. Number one at Virginia Tech, number one youth helmet, number one flag football headgear, et cetera, and the docs we have involved and everything else. But when people wear it, and, we've had some rock stars wear it in training camp, and are they going to wear it on the field or are they not? We're still going back and forth. But when somebody wears it in a game, like, they'll never switch to anything else. And
it's hard to get over that, though. And I've told you this, it's that dumb superstitious thing where, you get, because especially football, like you're constantly trying to stick to a routine and have habits that you can replicate success with. And so when something works for you, it's hard to break that and say, well, I got to try this and that. I told you this, like I wore Rydell forever, and I loved my Rydell helmet. I had a hard time going from, and I forget what it was called. I had a hard time going from my Rydell to my Rydell Speedflex.
Sure.
Like, I remember trying on the Speedflex, and I remember my equipment guy going like, no, it's Rydell. I was like, I know it's the same company, but I want my old helmet.
Yep.
Same thing with my cleats. My Nike stopped making, we used to call them work boots because they look like these massive old boots. Like, they were the ugliest things you've ever seen, and they made them forever.
Yep.
And Nike didn't care because they were like, nobody's buying Lyman shoes. That's not moving the needle for us.
Right.
So they made these massive boots. They look like moon boots. And I loved them. My ankles were always great. They were always tight. And they stopped making them to make these like sexier, thinner, lighter cleats.
Right.
And I hated it.
Yep.
I just absolutely hated it. And I refused. And my equipment guy's like, well, they don't make them anymore. And I was like, my equipment guy's Donnie. I was like, Donnie, you stockpile as many of these work boots as you can. And he did. Donnie went out. I wore a size 15. He found all the work boots. I forget what the name of this shoe is. I got to remember what it was. I think we stockpiled like 20 of these things because I go through about 2 a season.
Yep.
Because you wear through them pretty quick.
Yep.
And Donnie said, what are you going to do when there's no more and they run out? Are you going to switch shoes? I said, no, I'm going to retire. And he's like, are you serious? I was like, yeah. I swear to you, my last pair I wore.
That was it.
As soon as I retired. That was it. I retired on my last pair because I just refused to get into the other Nikes. Now, I tried them a couple games, but it was mostly those cleats I stayed in forever.
That's
because
pretty funny.
But it's hard. But to go back to what I was saying is it has nothing to do with it. And the newer cleats might have been just fine, but I just, in my mind, I was like, why am I going to change something that's worked so well for me? So there's a stubbornness to that, and it's hard. And I think I probably would have been the same way with the light helmet. Like I think it would have been really hard for me to switch over, but I understand, especially for the younger kids that don't know any better. Like this is the helmet I have my son in just because he had the exact thing that you and I talked about, which is he had a heavier helmet. He was fine, no concussions, but he came and smacked down to the ground, which is where those impacts come. And the weight and velocity of that, absolutely, we could see it on film, and we could see it. Now, he's fine, but I think if he had been in the light helmet last year, I do feel like that would have been something he could have avoided.
Sure.
And you take for granted, too, like their small necks and like, they're tough kids, but at 11, that's a lot of weight for – you can train and get used to it all you want. There's that break-in period that you do for a month, but it's a lot.
You can't resist a force when it gets past a certain point. You can go back and look at like the Trent Green, the big concussion he had when he was on the Redskins sliding, or a Trevor Lawrence sliding last year and you get hit. And no matter how much training you do, no matter how big you are, once you lose control of that weight and you can't resist it, and that thing now is thumping off the ground or off another player, knee, shoulder, whatever that is, all that extra kinetic energy goes into your head and in your neck and your cervical structure. And that's why we're so careful in designing this. And when you think about auto racing, special operations guys, motocross, there's not a single person that would go to a heavier helmet. And the failure of those helmets lead to a serious injury, fatality every time. And the weight, because your neck is balancing that, and you have fatigue over a course of a game, especially with younger kids. It's like, hey, it's got to take the hits in the lab, which it does at the top, but you can still have a lighter helmet, and there's just not been competitors out there to drive the technologies where you get better performance, lighter weight, competitive price, and we're finally there. So I got 2 questions for you, and then we're shipping you out of here. Number one, your biggest role is as a dad. I would, most of us say that, right? Knowing what you know now, knowing what you know about what you went through and what you see other kids go through in coaching, parents whose kids are just about to start football season this year, what advice would you give them to make sure that they're curating their kid if they haven't pushed them through a season of football before or ridden next to them through that season? What would you tell those parents having exposure from the NFL all the way back down to playing as a young kid?
I think football is such a challenging, demanding sport. I think it's helping your kid find the joy in it, however that is. But I think the biggest thing, and I don't think this is just specific to football, but I think the biggest mistake parents make is, especially for young kids, is they make it all about the results and not about the journey or the experience. And that doesn't mean you can't be hard on kids with sports. I mean, they crave discipline. They crave structure. Mm-hmm. I think that all that stuff's important. But I think when you de-emphasize the results and you don't make it about scoring the goal or catching the ball or throwing the perfect pass, or you don't come down on them for fumbling or making mistakes, they tend to have a much more positive experience with all those intangibles that they get to learn from. But things like discipline, doing things to the best of your ability, focusing, like those things are important, and those things transcend to anything you do. And so I think the problem is like when you're hard on little Johnny because he dropped the pass or he didn't make the basket, then little Johnny goes, well, I don't want to play that sport anymore because that results in me getting yelled at or not feel good because I didn't do that thing right. And so if I just don't play basketball or play football, then I won't have that experience with my parent. Versus something that is much more intangible and you can't escape it because it applies to everything, like working hard, being on time, focusing, like that applies to everything in your life. So it's not specific to that sport. So I think that's the biggest, and they say that, even the sports psychologists say that, they talk about the ride home is the most important time with your kid because they're looking to you for the feedback and approval and validation of what they've done. And when you make it about, when you don't make it about the process or the journey, and you make it about the results, then they tend to have a negative association with the sport, but also, it doesn't benefit them because then they make that thing the most important thing, and they play tense, and they're less likely to try things and make mistakes and learn, So I think that's the biggest thing. And that's what I've always tried to do, not only with my son, but I'm coaching the whole team with all the boys. Kid fumbles, I'm putting him right back in. I want him to experience second chance and the ability to redeem himself. And you're right. You were talking about, it's such an equalizer. Football is such a meritocracy, and I love that about the sport, And also it's important not to specialize kids so early and so young.
1,000% agree.
And I think that's the biggest thing is like parents are so quick to say, well, my kid's going to be a quarterback. And it's like, well, maybe,
Right.
But also you're 5'2" and
right. Yeah.
and your wife's 5'1", and I don't know how that's going to work out,
Yep.
Over the trajectory of their career. And maybe they don't want to play quarterback. Maybe there's another sport they want to play or another position within the sport. So I'm a big believer in multi-sport athletes. Unfortunately, we've gotten into a culture where we're specializing young, and it's hard because we're having to keep up with the Joneses.
That's it.
I've had this with my daughter in club sports, which is I had the foresight to say I don't want to burn her out and I want her to play different sports. But as she was doing that, she was getting punished by different clubs because she wasn't all in or she wasn't there full time. But then also the kids that were specializing there full time, I could tell a big difference in playing ability. Like I think she has a ton more potential than some other girls who might peak earlier, but they're getting way more reps on task than she is. And so I could see, so then I put her in a bad position, which is I'm telling her I'm going to hold her back and not burn her out. But I can see her confidence dwindling because she's not as good as this girl or that girl. And it's almost embarrassing because you don't want to play and be put in that social situation.
Right. Yep.
So it's hard because
it's a hard balance.
I want to say, like, don't get caught in that. But it's also like if your kid loves the sport, it's really tough to keep up with the Joneses when they're having to compete against kids that their parents have made it their life's mission.
That's right.
And I feel so bad for them, but it's harder for me because, again, like telling my story, I didn't hit a growth spurt until junior year of high school. And so, my mom's almost 6 foot. My dad's 6'3". Like, one of us of my siblings was bound to be big. My brother ended up being way bigger than me. He's like 6'7", 6'8". But, yeah, so I just think that's super important that you expose them to a ton of stuff and really try, especially young, to not get caught up in the specializing. And then don't make it about the results. Make it about the journey. You can still be hard on the kids and say, it's not okay to not focus in. It's not okay to disrespect the coach and not, do that drill to the best of your ability. I don't care if you ever catch a ball or play, but
sure.
you can't pick and choose when you want to do things the right way. And every kid knows what the right thing is or isn't.
They do. And it's great advice in terms of we have to fight, unfortunately, the culture right now because some of it is all financially driven, right? If you're a kid as a soccer player or a hockey player, it's really easy to quickly, hey, you got to be on this travel team or this, top tier team. And you poke at your kid's confidence if you don't participate. And you try to put them in multi-sports or encourage them to try other things. But then if they go down the soccer path or the hockey path or whatever that might be, and it's the wrong path, they're so far behind on the other, they don't have the fundamentals. And it's unfortunate, right? Like balancing that act is very difficult. But your point is well taken on don't so much focus on the result as the journey and what can they learn on this. Yeah. The chance of someone being a pro is infinitesimal, and those kids will get there usually with some curation, but yeah, I think you're spot on.
Well, in defense of the clubs, I think they've sort of gotten in this position because the parents have really driven it in a way that it is about money. Because the clubs, instead of focusing on developing players young, they are a win first mentality. So they're playing the best kids at that moment, at that time, because if they don't win, the parents get upset and they leave. If they leave, they don't have the money to pay the coaches to stay year round.
Right.
So we're in this kind of sick cycle of we have to win, otherwise the clubs don't have the money and everybody's upset.
Yep.
And the focus should be on making the best players possible. By the way, it benefits the club too.
Yep.
And I do find that I find that there's a ton of kids who I'm like, oh, that kid's a great athlete and they're going to be great, but they're not playing because this kid is a little bit better technically, but I don't see a huge ceiling for them. But regardless, like all these kids should be rotating in. All these kids, especially at 9 and 10, like 100%. I'm not talking like you can start getting in high school and all that stuff like that. I get, I get that we're starting to now pick lanes and all that, but at such a young age, it's just crazy to me that this is where we are. But I also understand why we're at it. I don't agree with it, but I understand how we got here, and I don't really know what the answer is of how to change it.
Last question for you. I end every one of these with the same questions. What do you want to be remembered for?
Honestly, I probably would have had a different answer about 5-6 years ago, and now I'm in a phase where I just want to be remembered by my kids being a good dad. Like I don't really have any grand legacy aspirations. And that's it. I want to give them what my dad gave me, which is I want to give them the prototype for how to do it, and also the prototype for how not to do it, and that being okay, and that they don't need validation elsewhere. They don't need the perfect path. It's just being present and doing the best you can, and learning from your mistakes and finding ways to do it better.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Remarkable guy, thrilled to have you associated with everything that we're doing. Would love to have you back at some point. We'll continue to, follow your progress with the team, and on your production side, excited to see new projects come out. And thanks so much for being here today.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.